Morning. This is Bob Passy again for Democracy Rising America. We're going to go on a little history trip this morning. We're going to talk about how this country has devolved from something closer to a democracy, never perfect, into pretty much a country occupied by a group of economic elite that espouse a sort of radical capitalism that is destroying democracy and destroying our society in the process, and our status as American citizens having any voice in our country. Over the last, just to give you a little background, when I was in my elementary years, probably about 7th or 8th grade in the early 50s, during the McCarthy period, we were always warned about how our entire way of life was going to be undermined by this threat of communism, that they were going to somehow take over the government. And we needed to be very worried about that. As it turns out, especially in the last several decades, has been documented by many, many people at this point, we have actually been taken over by a homegrown kind of ideology, and that is radical capitalism. Over the last 30 or 40 years, the political and economic rules have been changed very gradually, and our way of government pretty much subverted, because all of the power has been, political and economic power has been shifted to a very small group of economic elites. And we see this shifting, and we see the policy shifting, and we see, for instance, wages staying stagnant or going down. We see social programs recently being cut, and the distribution of our national wealth going primarily to the group on the top, in spite of the fact of growing productivity by workers. In fact, workers have been demoted to something less than important, as they have destroyed unions. And just about the only power now are the very rich, both in controlling the economy and the political process. What happens is that the leadership is co-opted. In other words, they were sort of bought out by the ideology of the economic elite. And that started fairly clearly by the end of the Bill Clinton administration. And then after that, we had, during that time, all the way from the New Deal on, but certainly in the last 30 or 40 years, the rising power of the economic elite has been threatening our existence as a democratic society, and we've seen attempts with Nixon and Reagan to manipulate the system to make sure that economic elite stays in power. And since then, we have. After Clinton, they were kind of frustrated that it wasn't moving fast enough, so they had almost a kind of soft coup in this country. By soft coup, I mean the kinds of things that have been taking place in Brazil, that the army doesn't take over, but the people in power are pushed out rather clearly in a not particularly democratic way. And soft coups have also, I think Ecuador maybe is another one in South America, where the rule by the ordinary people is being pushed out and the economic elite are taking over again. And with the second Bush election, the Bush-Gore election, that he obviously didn't win, and The Supreme Court actually appointed him as president. It was, in effect, a soft coup, and you saw major changes happening at that time. A redistribution of the tax system, suddenly we're at war, and everything, our rights as citizens have been almost destroyed. And after that, we have, because we saw the abuses of that and people were were upset enough to want somebody else, we got Barack Obama, but he so quickly was co-opted. And so now we have another election where the only people who are running are representatives of the economic elite. Different versions of it, to be sure, but nevertheless, the economic elite is in power. And we have been almost recolonized. We are now serving that economic elite, and we have very little voice. We have less and less economic power, less and less services. Almost everything, the tax system has become a sort of conduit to shift our tax money to the economic elite and to corporations, partially because of privatization, but all kinds of other things too. So we work hard and we spend our lives trying to survive, and we see the cost of education going up, the cost of healthcare going up, and drugs going up, our wages going down or staying stagnant, and less and less power, and everything is being determined by those few people on top. So I think it's important to look at the history of that whole thing and see, and to be aware that things have shifted and we're being occupied by a foreign, in terms of not very democratic ideology, and it's time to recognize that and say, no, we can't do this anymore. Anyway, hope you think about this a while and decide what you can do to maybe move back toward a more democratic system. Anyway, this is Bob Passy for Democracy Now! Democracy Rising, sorry, America, and we'll talk to you later. Bye now.